What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us live. We're back with the revolution. Hey, Mike, how you doing this week? It's been an adventurous and interesting week since we last talked. I think shot gloves in schools. What else?
Oh yeah, I saw that story. That was crazy. Um, well, I've been on the West Coast, completely checked out from reality. So I'm back here to talk about shocking kids with electroshock gloves in elementary schools and all the other fun things that the Trump administration is doing for us, the American people.
Well, and those are the flashy things that we hear about, the shot gloves, the violence in the streets, but there's also that subtle violence of racism and systemic racism, which some people seem to think no longer exists, which is why I'm excited about our guest tonight, because she works for an organization that is specifically about helping stop and reverse some of the policies that are hurting the Black community. And it seems like nobody wants to even talk about race anymore. Like, I feel like Republicans managed to say like critical race theory, and then everybody like ran away and was like, race isn't an issue anymore.
I don't, you know, I got a different take on that because I have conversations with people. The only people that don't want to talk about racism are the racists.
Yes.
Everybody else is like, even people that are in my life that were like, I don't know if racism's as bad as it was, maybe. And they're like, yeah, it's fucking really bad. It might even be getting worse. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess a silver lining from the Trump administration. Thanks for letting us know that there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to racism in this country.
Yeah, and hopefully our guest tonight will shed some light on some of the things that people might not realize are overtly racist, like school vouchers, the way our housing policies are done, and mortgages, and that huge disparity that we see between Black wealth, white wealth, and everybody else's wealth. So, love to bring her on, Nadine Smith. Color of Change, President and CEO, formerly of Equality Florida, and you are in Florida right now, which is kind of the birthplace for a lot of this fascism.
Yeah. What everybody else called Project 2025, we just called Wednesday. This is just the way it has been in Florida. This has been the lab where they've tested a lot of those things. So for me, when I go to places and I'd say I was a Floridian and people would give me that look like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, you should see this as coming attractions, not a place to have pity, but to learn the lessons that we're learning the hard way. But it's great to see you both.
It seemed to happen so fast because I lived in Florida in the early 2000s, and it didn't seem nearly as bad as it was when I returned to visit in like the 2020s. So how did that slide happen? And did people in Florida see it happening in real time and want to react, or did it just kind of catch everybody off guard?
Well, again, Florida is a microcosm. And so when we talk about attacks on Black voters, when we talk about gerrymandering, Florida is an example of a state that had a pretty 50-50 bellwether state, could lean either way based on the personality of the candidate. And then gerrymandering came, and Black voters got packed into districts, and Republicans have controlled Florida politics at every level for decades now, which is why when they run and they criticize Florida government, you go, it's your own party that has been in power this entire time. So, but yeah, so when we talk about Calais decision, the Supreme Court decision gutting voting rights yet again, we're not just talking about harm to the Black community. Like if you're an evil genius and you're trying to figure out how can I inflict the most harm on the most people? Like, how can I go after women, reproductive rights? How can I go after the LGBTQ community? Whatever the issue is, you would go after the Black vote. The Black vote has been the most persistent, consistent engine for pushing this country towards its actual values. Like the degree to which we can call ourselves a democracy has been through the fights led and pushed by Black voters. And so, it makes sense that if you're wanting to dismantle this democracy, you have to go after Black voters. And so they're using a very well-worn playbook of create fear, then identify a scapegoat to be the target of that fear, and then orchestrate, incite violence. And while all of that is playing out, go raid the coffers, plunder the economy. Because at the end of the day, it's always follow the money. Nobody thinks that there's a moral center to, certainly not to Trump, but even the people around him are filled with people who, before they got their mouth on the, financial teat of this enterprise, they were calling him Hitler. They were calling him all sorts of names, calling him a disaster. But as soon as they were able to get themselves into a position to benefit from it, well, then they changed their tune.
Mike, we were talking just before Nadine came on, and does this resonate with you? Because also we're seeing like nobody in the white community is getting rich either, unless they're like in Trump's sort of echelon. So,
yeah, no, I mean, we talk about, we have this conversation, I feel like almost every single episode, and how like white people, especially white working class Americans, under this administration, I think a lot of them are starting to wake up to the fact that these are conditions that communities of color have lived with literally for generations, and that we are now, drawing the ire of our own government. And so it's a new experience for many of us. But also, Nadine, another conversation we constantly have is the argument of, the enemy of the other, and how that has been, this age old argument that has been made when when politicians can't deliver to white working class Americans, they just simply say, well, it's not our fault. It's Black people, or it's brown people, or it's anyone else that they can point to. And I mean, unfortunately, year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, that argument resonates with a whole host of Americans who, and I've had these conversations, who are content in their miserable, struggling lives as long as they can say it's because of the fucking Mexican, or it's because of the inner city Black people.
Yeah.
I guess, the flip side to that coin is that I think a lot more white Americans are starting to wake up and understand, at least to a point where they can better empathize and sympathize with, with communities of color and their fellow Americans.
Or at least see how it's not restricted to who they thought it would be restricted to, right? The number of people who are waking up to, what's the guy who has Trump tattooed on his arm, who got deported today?
Oh yeah.
Which one, right? Oh no, I voted for him, but I didn't think he'd take my wife, or I didn't think he'd shut down my business. I didn't think he'd come after my employees. I believed him when he said they were going after hardened criminals. And, so I understand when people respond to that with, you were fine digging a hole for other people to step in, and you want sympathy now that you've fallen into it. But at the same time, we live in a world that is where the information we get is primarily on platforms controlled by people who are absolutely aligned with this administration, right? And people are propagandized to a degree that sometimes it's hard for us to fully comprehend that what I see in my daily feed and what my neighbor sees in their daily feed bear no relationship to each other. And so in a world where people are that propagandized, I think you have to leave the light on, even if it arrives in the form of somebody who was content to inflict that on a stranger, but now has awakened because it's the karma has arrived at their door. That may be the starting point for deconstructing what's happening. And I do see a lot of people who are arriving at that realization that they've been played for fools, not because it's landed on them specifically, but because they really bought the idea that they were going after hardened criminals. They were going at, and now they see with their own eyes, they're brutalizing people in the streets. And they've got shot gloves in schools now. They've got They've got a budget for these masked up goon squads kidnapping people off the street with no accountability. And in fact, they're putting up money so that if you are found liable for brutalizing somebody, you've got a $500,000 fund to get you out of any accountability for it. So I think people are waking up, and I think the past election cycle is showing that people are looking for significant change, not just can we get back to where we were before this, agenda began to rain hell on us. It's more like, you know what, out of the rubble of what they've destroyed, we actually want to build something that's worthy of us. And that part is the part that gives me hope and some excitement and the possibility of new coalitions being forged. Talk about flock cameras and you'll see a collection of unlikely bedfellows standing together to say we're tired of the government surveilling every breath we take.
We were actually just talking before you even came on about the excitement around some of these new candidates. And Angie Nixon was a surprise for a lot of people. But for anyone who's paying attention, like you just said, it shouldn't have been too much of a surprise. I love your take on what the possibility is for Florida, because this feels hopeful for Florida. And I haven't felt hopeful for Florida in a long time.
I mean, it's, I think what you were saying is that people want candidates who will just talk directly about the issues that are affecting their daily lives. We're seeing it in New York, we're seeing it in Michigan, and we're seeing it here in Florida. I mean, Angie had a grassroots campaign and a track record that she was running on. It wasn't a function of a little bit of time in the headlines. Angie's been somebody who's been, on the ground, talking to people, fighting for folks for years. And even though I think she was outspent 17-1, at the end of the day, her message was resonating. And I think David Jolly was smart when asked about her candidacy to acknowledge that, she's got a message that's not that far from mine. We might not agree on everything, but she's talking to the daily lives of everyday people in a way that hits home. And I said earlier that you can't look at what's happening to Black voters being, voting rights protections being rolled back without understanding that so much of the systematic barriers to economic security were put in place to deny Black people access to, like the donut hole in Medicare. That is hurting a lot of people, was there because they wanted to make it harder for Black people in the middle of these conversations. So many of the things that are harming all Americans were put in place specifically to box Black Americans out of possibilities. And so my hope is that, it's sort of like the mask is off, right? This is a plunder economy where people are getting away with whatever they're getting away with it because they can, right? Because who's going to check them? Right now you have the president basically saying, I want to go after, let's say, Southern Poverty Law Center. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because I have the ability to use the same system that could, what do they say, grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. But he's using that to create a de facto blacklist, right? So because he's weaponized the Justice Department to go after his enemies, you have, groups like, Vanguard and Fidelity allowing him to weaponize it by freezing money to Southern Poverty Law Center. And if that's allowed to stand, then through the indictment process, he'll just create a de facto blacklist against anybody who's willing to stand toe to toe with him and fight back. And so we got to stand up for Southern Poverty Law Center, and we've got to push back against the complete corruption of the criminal justice system, so that it becomes just another arm of his personal vendettas and his political strategy. So all of it flows from the same playbook, and the only way we're going to stop it is for us to have these kinds of conversations and to wake people up to how they're being played. You kind of go, why on earth is every politician talking about the trans community and using these Republican candidates are using the same talking points? Well, it's because a think tank realized that gay marriage was no longer the wedge issue. And they literally wrote a report saying, we got to find something else. They said we threw everything against the wall. And what we realized was a lot of Americans don't know this community, and it's small enough that we can define them. And they set about to make every conversation about the trans community. I think people just have to wake up and ask themselves, if you're being told to hate somebody, ask yourself who benefits from you hating that group? Who's orchestrating that for you? Because that's not what most people in their day-to-day lives are thinking about, putting energy towards. They're just trying to, keep a roof over their head, deal with the incredible inflation. But they've got us having every conversation about, except for the ones that implicate what they're up to.
You must not have watched a lot of Fox News, Nadine, because Fox News has been training its audience to be angry about everything literally for decades, which I think is part of the problem. As a former Fox News consumer myself, I watched it, and I watched relationships that I had literally for my entire adult life, some beyond that in which we never engaged in a single political conversation ever, become 100% about the outrage of the day. And so, it works. Unfortunately.
Well, outrage is fun, which is why we're seeing them attack the WNBA right now. It was like the one thing that was good and wholesome that everyone could enjoy, that was bringing people together, has now become this culture war issue. And I'm kind of annoyed because a lot of Black men have piled on there. And instead of defending a league that is primarily driven by Black women, Black queer women, they're adding to what feels like is very tailored to the upcoming midterms. It's like they needed to get them excited about something. How about let's just bring out Sophie Cunningham and have her be the poster child for the issue that they're going to use to drive a wedge between people between now and November.
Yeah, I mean, well, to that point, Maya, I mean, one of the things that a lot of it, first of all, I think a lot of it is performative. Like, I don't even know if Sophie Cunningham really is the MAGA Barbie or not. I think that she's, a bench player who recognizes the fact that she can gain a tremendous amount of attention, whether she is ideologically in line with the things that she says or does. There is an environment in which people simply do this for attention. I don't know if that's more disgusting than doing it because you believe it. Probably equally disgusting. But unfortunately, I mean, all of us exist in an algorithm that pushes anger, it pushes conflict, and it drives those types of interactions versus, having a pleasant conversation, which, so often just gets buried in the nothingness.
Yeah, we live in a very alienating time. We live in a time where we don't sit out on the front porch and talk to our neighbors. We live in a time where so much of our interactions are through screens and memes, and I think they have spent a lot of time. Remember on Facebook where you'd have these quizzes like, which door appeals to you? If you were in the woods, which path would you take? They were doing all of these kind of, which Brady character are you? But what they were doing was scanning us for anxiety. Mm-hmm. And they began to deliver these messages, Cambridge Analytica, not based on your political affiliation, but how much they could trigger anxiety in you. And that's how they began to pinpoint the messages they were delivering to voters. Like, if you're somebody that I can really press this fear button, I can make you afraid of anything. I can make you afraid of immigrants. My hometown, Panama City, Florida, where after Hurricane Michael, the only reason that Panama City got it back together was because of immigrant workers. And you had people bringing casseroles to job sites and, Guatemalan workers, Mexican workers. And it's like, how do you not connect to the same people who work through rain and, heat to put a roof back on your house, how do you turn around and empower this government to brutalize them, to tear them from their families? Like the cognitive dissonance is really astonishing. But in that cognitive dissonance is perhaps the seeds of people awakening, because they do know that this is not decent. They know at some level that we allow schools to be shot up at a rate that it barely gets media attention anymore. And yet the response to that is to do nothing about guns or access to guns, but to say, yeah, let's put more guns in the hands of teachers in our schools. Let's put shock gloves, on more police in schools. It's like it is the opposite reaction. We are watching our freedoms be taken away day by day by a party that once touted individual liberty as something that they valued. And instead what we have is lockdown schools, more guns in the street, more surveillance, more intrusion into our medical decisions, our everyday lives. And I think that we're beginning to see in the form of how election turnout is, people awakening to the fact that we are less free than we've ever been.
It's kind of startling when you look at the flock map of where the flock cameras are. I think there's something around 150,000 cameras that have been mapped. And we live this life now where it's like, it's us and screens, right? It's us and the people who are on the screen at Fox News. It's us and people who are on the screen on social media. And I love what you said about communities and people getting to know each other, and that conversation on the porch that people aren't having anymore. So how do we take maybe some of this inflammatory stuff that people want to talk about? People want to get angry. They want to talk about it. How can we take that kind of thing and pivot it and say, okay, we'll start here and we'll use that to get to a conversation about school vouchers, about the economic inequality of how housing reform is happening or not happening. How can we, I guess, seize those spicy things to get to talk about the less interesting stuff?
Well, I think there are two things that are true. One is that we have to speak with passion about what we care about, but we have to make sure that they're not setting the tempo. Like if we're just batting, if we're just angry and they're angry and all people see is that, it's not very helpful. What people want is to know that you're fighting for them and their kid and their lives. Like yes, there are a certain group of people who are animated only by, I like him because he hates who I hate, right? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who never once thought about immigrants in a negative way, don't really believe that whole they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, but they have a sense that something's wrong and he's giving them a story. Mm-hmm. Well, we gotta counter that, not simply by reacting to every bit of poison they inject into the veins of society, but by actually having a vision about what we want our country actually be and look like and feel like for the majority of us. And I think when you look at New York and you look at Michigan and you look at Angie and the way the prediction about how the vote is going, it's people voting to say, we're done with this. We're done with a nonstop supply of anger and hatred and people who are so brazenly above the law. I mean, in Florida, you can't turn on the news without people being, people who are close, for example, to Governor DeSantis. Just yesterday, the day before, the guy who got arrested for one of the most heinous child molestation cases. Like everything they say about others is a projection of what they're doing. Oh, yeah. Right. And so we've got to start talking about the world we deserve to live in, and that our kids deserve to grow up in, and that, their kids deserve to inherit, and start voting with the things that are available to us, not just our vote, but where are you spending your money? Because at the end of the day, it's politicians and corporations. And a good number of those politicians are owned by corporations. So holding corporations accountable for where they're putting their money where they're being silent, how much they capitulate. You know, if you've got money in a, you know, your retirement dollars, your 401k, wherever your money is, ask whether or not they've bent the knee to Trump and are freezing assets to racial justice groups, right? And if they are, move to a different one. If you're at work, you know, Benevity is the leading company that matches dollars in the workplace. If you want to give, they've frozen Southern Poverty Law Center, but you know their number one competitor, Groundswell, said no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to bend the knee. And so, you know, every day we make decisions where we spend our dollars. You know, you want to go to Costco that stood 10 toes down on DEI, or do you want to spend your money at Target that, you know, broke every promise they made? And so I believe that we have to remember our personal power, you know, the decisions we make daily, but the transformational power comes from reaching out to each other, being in community, deciding, you know, Moms for Liberty got dog walked in this election.
Yeah.
They got swept in this election. And it's because parents, actual parents, showed up and said, we're tired of you cosplaying as parents. Most of you either aren't parents or you don't have kids in these schools. You have them in these schools that are benefiting from vouchers that your legislator husband runs. You know what I mean? It's like always follow the money. And so when the real parents showed up, you saw what was real and what was phony. And it's that grassroots organizing with real people that's making a difference right now. So I'm actually hopeful that there is a broad awakening that's happening. And, you know, there's a kind of populism that is crossing political boundaries right now around flock cameras, where you see unlikely folks standing together. I don't know if this is happening in the US, but I think in the UK, there's a group called Blade Runners that just go out with sawzalls and are cutting down flock cameras. I don't know if that's come to the US, but here in St. Pete, you know, there are people that go out with poles with a cardboard at the top and block the flock cameras. There are people wearing license plate fashion to kind of muddle the ability of flock cameras to follow. I think there is a growing uprising against this idea that we should just come to accept masked goons, unaccountable, brutalizing people in the streets, shock gloves, constant surveillance. I think it is brewing, and we've got to show people that it's making a difference and that there's something better on the other side.
And I love what you talked about, the parents getting involved, because it reminds me that democracy is not a spectator sport, that we do need to get involved. And how are we going to, because a lot of people are so stretched thin with time and they're saying, I don't have time to be involved, but we see what involvement actually does. It gets people excited, it gets actual results. And so how, for the people who are watching, and just how can we, I guess, be more efficient with our time? You've managed smaller organizations. Now you're running a huge organization. What are some things that people can take from those learnings on organizational development and things where we can be more efficient with our time to be able to accomplish all of these things and be in 1,000 places at once?
I mean, here's what I'll say. I think people want to know what they're being asked to do actually translates into something real, you know? I don't know that people want an easy way out. Like, I remember at Equality Florida when Moms for Liberty and the Proud Boys were forming basically gauntlets outside of school board meetings. And I remember we were thinking, is it right of us to ask these parents to come to a school board meeting when they're going to have to walk through armed, masked up Proud Boys, menacing them, and have ugly words hurled at them and their kids? And I remember, you know, we said, it's not our job to decide that for them. Our job is to tell them what they'll encounter. And not only did it not stop them, I think there were parents who canceled things in order to walk that gauntlet, you know, because you're talking about my kid, you know. And so I think that there is within us, I don't think people are asking for the easy button. I think they want to know, will it matter? Will it change if I do this thing? Because I'll do a brave thing. The civil rights movement showed us this. The people in Minneapolis have shown us this. And campaign after campaign, I've seen people make extraordinary sacrifices, really work hard because they believed what they were being asked to do made sense and would change things. And so to me, that's why grassroots organizing is so important, because you get to see that change. You get to feel it. Sometimes it's not that you win that night, but eventually when Moms for Liberty first arrived, they were winning, they were sweeping, but there came this tipping point where we were outnumbering them 10-1 in school board meetings. And then they just began to fade away. And so, yeah, there's not a singular thing, but what I will say is, do not let them convince you that your vote doesn't matter. They wouldn't be trying to block it if that were true. Don't let them make you believe that deciding where you spend your money doesn't matter. Ask Target how much it matters. Target's never going to be the same. We have power every single day. And talk to your friends and family. And I would just say, you don't have to win every argument. Sometimes it's just about planting a seed. Like what would have to happen for you to abandon this guy? Well, if you did something like this, and then, 3 days later, you're looking at a headline okay, you made the conditions for your, and I do see more and more people. A friend of mine, Rich Logis, who started leaving MAGA.org.
Yep.
The stories that he keeps uplifting. I think there's reason for a great deal of hope that the country is awakening and, more importantly, deconstructing these lies. We're finally confronting these really fundamental lies. And I will just say, Michael, I've really enjoyed, I don't know if enjoyed is the right way to say it, but watching your evolution from those early interviews in the aftermath of January 6th and how you've continued to be this persistent voice. I think there's something in the authenticity and rawness that you bring to this that I think is reaching people that I won't reach, that, my story doesn't reach. So it's just really been, I've really enjoyed that you don't hold back, and that you are, there's nothing in you that says you're going to back down.
Well, I really appreciate that. That's quite a compliment coming from you. And I'll say this, I mean, I always have the benefit of being the least educated person in every conversation, and nearly every room that I walk into. And shit, now my kids are in high school. They're more educated than I am. So I'm really screwed. That being said, like, my motivation when I left the police department and got into this space was to simply allow people to walk in my shoes and see my experience and my evolution and explain it as often as I possibly can, with the hopes that other people would come to the similar conclusions or the same conclusions that I came to, which actually brings me to a question that I have for both of you. And, Nadine, go first, you're our guest. But obviously a whole host of Americans, white Americans, who typically don't have to endure the treatment that many of them are enduring from their own government simply because of their privilege of being white Americans, are experiencing targeting by their government, and all the other things that come along with it. And also, I think there's a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy for, people that they see that are being brutalized right in front of them, in their own neighborhoods. And that's resonating with them as well. One of the things that I try to do is, because it's part of my evolution that you described, is bring them beyond that conversation to how this is adversely impacting you, and take them to a place where maybe they can empathize with communities of color who have been enduring this type of treatment literally for hundreds of years. Because, Maya and I talk all the time about revisiting the aftermath of the Civil War, and how, at least in my humble opinion, a lot of the things that we're dealing with today, specifically, the white supremacist ideology that has infected the Republican Party so overtly, it's not subtle anymore, if at least not to this white guy. And so I guess my question is, do you see in your conversations with white communities, with white friends, do you see an evolution as well, that they are waking up to some historical truths that have existed for people that don't have the same skin tone as them?
That's a good question. You know, they talk about a K-shaped economy. You know, the haves are getting richer and the have-nots are getting poor. I think we have a K-shaped white community around this. Like the people who have just, you know, they have the hook in their belly of white replacement theory and every kind of fear of difference. Like it's all they can hold on to. Their identity of Trump being their champion and this ideology being their only saving grace are getting worse. And I think for people who haven't bought into that, maybe, you know, I know people who identify as Nader, Obama, Bernie, Trump voters, right? And the thing that ties it together is they voted for who they thought was the most disruptive to a system they thought was fundamentally broken, right? Those people, I think, are reachable because I don't think they were motivated by a hatred of a particular group, just a sense that this isn't working. I can't make ends meet, you know, and as bad as it is for me, I think it's going to be worse for my kids. You know, that's why this whole casino economy of market and crypto is so enticing, because it feels like, you know, might as well roll my dice here because, you know, corporations aren't taking care of you. They're being raided. Your pension's going away. So I think in a world like that, where everybody is struggling, it's hard to have conversations about privilege. But what I would say is the weapons that are fashioned to harm the Black community inevitably harm everybody. And the hell you're catching as a poor white person in America has been made possible by the hell you've allowed Black people to catch. And to the degree that you stand up in this moment and have some solidarity and stop bootlicking billionaires and realize, you know, who's profiting from all of this, who's profiting from you hating immigrants, who's profiting from this sort of nonstop attack on a very narrow slice of the population called the trans community, who's profiting from vilifying people and disrupting their lives. It ain't you. And at the end of the day, what we have is a country that is being plundered by, you know, essentially a crime family, while they pit everybody else against each other in the arena. So your groceries aren't getting cheaper by hating immigrants. They're not your health isn't improving by demonizing Black people. You know, the possibilities for your kids aren't getting brighter because of that. And I think there is a slow dawning realization that they've hitched their wagon to a lie about what this country is. And so, yes, I do see some people waking up, and then I do see others, they've bit down hard on this lie and they're going to ride it out no matter what.
I like what you said so much about the K-shaped economy, applying that to the way white people are reacting in this moment. And I'm from Downers Grove, Illinois, which is, I like to call it, an aggressively white suburb of Chicago. And so I have a lot of friends who are not coming into any level of awareness whatsoever because I think just even from a class perspective, a lot of people from these areas live not just in an insular way, but in a self-centered way. Whereas it's like, as long as they're doing okay, you know, we know where the Dow is at. Well, they all have 401ks. So like everybody right now is like, oh, I don't like people being brutalized in the streets, but I can still buy things. I'm not affected as much by the 20%, 30% increase in groceries and gas prices. And so I'm seeing a lot of that. But my hope comes from when people do wake up, which there are people, as you mentioned, who are slowly awakening, is anytime you wake up, there's that grogginess, right? Like, and so I feel like we're in an era of grogginess where they're like, what's going on? Like, this isn't the America that I thought I was in. Wow, they're shooting white people in the streets, which if you ask my mom, who grew up in the 60s and 70s, she remembers Kent State vividly. So she knows when class class is threatened, when the upper class is threatened, that they will shoot white people in the streets. And so it feels like almost like a new generation of white folks are starting to go,
Yeah.
oh, I get it. They'll go after us too. And so I hate that things seem to have to be like cyclical, but I'd like to believe it's cyclical, like that kind of upward spiral where it's like we're just hitting that moment again, but we're continuously growing. So I still have hope, even though it can be challenging at times.
Well, listen, hope, you got to hold on to hope. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, like, if I could do it, anybody can. I mean, like, I was, full-throated law enforcement, like, or what I thought was, like I was heavily invested in that community for 20 years of my life. And I realize now that it's kind of like all the dots were there. It's like, those puzzles that you put together or that you draw, with a pencil, you got to connect the dots. But you got to do them in like numeric order. If you don't do them in numeric order, you're just getting a jumble of shit. Like I had all the dots were there. Like I worked in and around communities of color my entire law enforcement career, impoverished, like below poor, below zero. And I saw all the things that were impacting these communities. But I was looking at this, from a skewed prism of law enforcement, policing culture, being a white kid from the suburbs. And a lot of it too was ego. And then you kind of get away from that. Like I have and had the benefit. I mean, unemployment for me has been a tremendous gift of, being able to go around the country and have conversations with people. And I mean that, what happened to me on January 6th seems so irrelevant, but it gave me such a tremendous amount of access to have those conversations. And I truly wish that every white American could have their ass kicked and take a year off and just go around and just fucking have those conversations with people, because it was just absolutely the most eye-opening experience to me. And I did, Nadine, come to the conclusion that, I had been sold a bag of goods when it came to, what patriotism is and what America is really about versus these ideals that many of us at least aspire for it to be. And I learned that, through the Trump administration, everything is subjective, even apparently the Constitution. So we can literally make this country whatever the fuck we want it to be, if we just put our minds to it.
I do think that part of what this administration has shown us is that we don't have to be as patient as we've been told we needed to be. Like we can change things really quickly.
Yeah.
And history tells us that these are the moments where they overreach, they steal with both hands instead of one hand, and there comes a breaking point. Who knows what it'll be? Maybe it's the AI bubble bursting, and those your friends back home aren't living high off the for their the Dow, but something gives, and people go, this is enough. And I wish it was. I wish that enough line was before now, but I think we're getting there, and we have to continue to remind people. Like, what does it mean to be free if you can't make medical decisions with your doctor? The government gets to do that. I mean, we literally have we live in a state where a Republican lawmaker had an ectopic pregnancy, needed an abortion. They were saying, hey, the laws you helped pass make it impossible for us. We have to wait until you're in a life or death situation. So she calls the governor, and the governor calls that facility and gives the green light. I mean, you talk about the most, dystopian Handmaid's Tale madness. And so, yes, and here we are, where more people have been arrested for putting their hand in the water of the reflecting pool than have been because they were implicated in the Epstein files, right? So there's a place where people are going, okay, this is broken. This is broken. I have been sold a bill of goods. I'm not going to keep going along with this, and we're going to push back. And I don't know what the tipping point is. I don't know that there's a single tipping point, but history tells us when they get this greedy, when they take too much, when they push too hard, there is a backlash to the backlash. And I think that's what people are beginning to see and feel when you realize, you know what, my immigrant neighbor is not making my life harder. But now everywhere I go, I'm under surveillance. And my favorite restaurant just got shut down because they raided this hardworking guy's place who's been here for 20 years. Like, it's not adding up. The math isn't mathing. And you either numb yourself further, or you confront the contradiction in between what you say you believe and what you're seeing with your own eyes.
Yeah, I think we are hitting rock bottom. I kept thinking that, as we were going along, like, I thought January 6th was actually going to be a rock bottom situation, and it wasn't. And so you're right. If a lot of people aren't at rock bottom, they will be soon. And I like what you said about having a vision for what we want as opposed to what we are just fighting against. And to think big, to dream big.
Yeah.
I love cheesy mugs and things, and I have a mug that says dream big. And yes, like, I feel like America, we need to put some things on our vision board. Yes. See, exactly. I keep them around my house because you need those reminders. And we have to think big and dream big, but we also have to believe that we're worthy of it. And I feel like people are sometimes so exhausted and beaten down that they don't necessarily have the ability to say, I deserve more. With my tax dollars, I deserve more. And so that's what I'm hoping is going to happen over the next several months, is that people are starting to demand more because they know they deserve more. And I feel like Color of Change does a lot of the research and policy stuff that makes that possible. So
Yeah.
I am very grateful for the work that you are doing.
Well, thank you. It's one of the reasons Color of Change does not take corporate contributions, because we know we're going to have to hold them accountable for the ways that they are harming people. And it is a place that we all can have influence. And, colorofchange.org, stop by, join our mailing list, and we will definitely plug you into ways that you can make a difference, a real and tangible difference in your world. And, don't give up. These are the moments, these are the inflection points in history where people start realizing that the people at the top will continue to take until the rest of us link arms and push back and demand the world that we deserve. And, every time they tell us to be more selfish, more scared, more isolated, more fearful of difference, just know that's the beginning of them running a game on you, right? So be curious. I'm going to sound like Ted Lasso, but be curious, and be kind, and look out for each other,
and believe,
and believe that we've been through hard times. We've been through tough patches. Our country people have overcome their internal biases. They've opened their eyes. And sometimes some of the most unexpected people have turned into champions.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Nadine, thank you so much for stopping by. Everyone, please go check out the org and donate and get involved. That's how we give meaning to our lives and purpose. And I think a lot of us are looking for that now. So thanks, Nadine.
All right, Maya, great to see you again. Michael, great to meet you. And,
thank you so much.
I'm always available. Always glad to talk. Take care.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I felt hopeful, and I didn't expect to feel hopeful going into this episode. I was kind of like, oh my God, everybody's spying on us. Everything sucks. I'm like, I can't wait until the midterms. It's just too far away. And she reminded me that working on something is what gives meaning. I think so much of American life can be on autopilot. When things used to be stable, it was very easy to just do, I'm going to do A, B, and then C follows. And that was what was so great about being an American, is it was very predictable. And as it's become unpredictable, people have either sunk or figured out, oh, I have to learn how to swim. And I think getting involved and building something together is a great way to swim, to have meaning.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that conversation was good for the soul. I mean, I love the fact, we're always talking about things that people can do, and we focus a lot on like getting involved, politically, organizing, doing things like that. But it could be as simple as just where you spend your money, something that you do literally each and every day, regardless of, what your status is in the world. Like, you're going to spend money, and choosing where to spend it, can be a tremendous act of political defiance in this particular moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't set foot in a Target. Even when I was in the US, I had not set foot in a Target since the boycott began. And I was a regular Target shopper. And it made me feel like I was doing something important just by not going to Target, which isn't to say that I didn't continue to shop at Amazon, but I did the things that I could do. And even now, with a lot of the ICE stuff, I'm seeing there are airlines that are pushing back. And I would love to see people push back on the airlines and say, hey, you need to push back more. Like, we cannot have ICE in the airports on the jetway detaining people. And so we have power. And I think by exerting our power, that's what is going to make people more excited about getting up in the morning. I think like a lot of people maybe don't have the resilience necessarily for it yet because it's so new to them. Like, it's so new, like, oh, this oppression is new. I am not used to being oppressed. And I think that's why I'm always like, hey, why aren't we listening to the marginalized groups that have had to survive all these years? Because we have the strategies, but we also have the resilience. Like, unfortunately, I wish I didn't in many ways, but I do. And so it's important to build that muscle and then flex that muscle. And the more of us that are oppressed, which is now feels like everybody, the merrier, because the quicker we can get it done before they finish the robots. Because once they finish the robots, Mike, did you see the robot?
No.
The one
What
that
the
like
fuck is this?
the robot that is like running faster than Usain Bolt and like can jump like 2 meters in the air.
What is that for?
Exactly, Mike. Exactly. Didn't like cops. Definitely don't like RoboCops.
Yeah, that's all we fucking need is robots making life and death decisions in a law enforcement capacity. Although, I don't know, could it be worse than these like fucking Neanderthal ICE agents that shoot first and ask for your ID later? I don't know.
Or who get caught on, I guess, a hot mic or a body cam saying overtly racist things about the people that they are about to detain. I mean, at least the robots are also somehow being built racist because algorithms are racist too. So I don't know. I don't like robots. I don't like robots.
Racist. We can't get rid of racism. It's even in the robots.
It is though, because everything that they code and they build the algorithms are built by people who are potentially racist. And so a lot of those things get built in, or at least unconscious bias gets built in to things. And so like, even we know facial recognition software is more likely to get a black face wrong than a white face wrong, which means black people are going to be more likely to be detained by those type of systems. So it's like, yeah, no, this whole, how she said like Flock is bringing people together. Yeah, it is. Like, when I showed my mom the Flock map, like where all of the things were, she was stunned. Like, she was visibly shaken.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even know what the fuck those things were, to be honest with you, until a few months ago when like a buddy of mine brought it up in conversation, who's kind of like from that world. And he's like, dude, look at deflock dot fucking whatever .com or something or other. And I went on there and it's like there's like 150 of them in my own fucking in my immediate vicinity.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. They were working with Ring camera. I think people power came together and was like, Ring, absolutely not. But I think they were also tapping into Ring cameras. So that meant like, hey, even if you're like in an apartment building and somebody has a Ring camera on their door, you're being tracked in your apartment building. Like the databases that they are able to build off of our information and our data is truly terrifying, because the surveillance isn't just to track us down and potential criminal activity. They're also surveilling us to be able to serve us different prices, to be able to block us from employment. And so I remember watching a documentary about China and all of their different like their social score and their different systems to kind of keep people in check.
Yeah.
And basically now we've got the same thing.
Yeah, we're vastly approaching that. I mean, with the the way that the federal government is reviewing people's social media, making determinations as to who can come into the country, even if without even if you're an American citizen, you come into the country and you've said some nasty things about Donald Trump, you'll have your devices taken away from you and have the data dumped for the Department of Homeland Security to do with as they may. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's and we've seen. It's not like we haven't seen these abuses on behalf of the federal government before. I mean, we saw them during the civil rights movement. We saw them during the anti-war demonstrations during the Vietnam War, where the FBI was keeping tabs on people who were simply protesting. Were part of protest groups against these particular goings on in Americans' day-to-day lives. And it's like, this is just a souped up version of that because they have more technology available to them. And I mean, even as somebody, listen, I think it's more terrifying to me coming from a law enforcement background, because I see the morons that sit behind this, these screens and are the ones who are in charge of, disseminating this information or even just having access to it. I mean, we've seen now countless examples of police officers who are now being arrested and criminally charged for abusing this, this information that's it's readily available to all officers, and two, there's absolutely no accountability mechanism. Like, I want people to understand that, like, as a police officer, you can log into these things, and it's only, most of the time, it's only after the fact, after something happens, that they realize that there was this pattern of behavior. But there's no like independent auditor that goes through and says, like, Officer Joe Schmo logged into these cameras like 10,000 times over the past 30 days, which would be an insane amount of times. It's usually only after like his spouse, girlfriend, random female that he was, pursuing, something bad happens to them, and they're like, oh, by the way, this guy ran her plate like 2,000 times, and that's scary.
Yeah, well, and also, if these systems have the ability to track all of us, they also have the ability to track who's using it. So they could build the accountability into it if they wanted to. They just choose not to. And so, and I'm not saying we should keep these even with accountability. I am definitely of the anti-flock contingent of people. And so, yeah, I think people are waking up. And I am just really excited about getting to the midterms so that we can get people voting for what actually matters, which is our day-to-day life, and not the BS that they are trying to push down our throats of things that aren't actually happening. I'm very over the manufactured problems and would like us to get to solving real problems, like the climate crisis and things. So, because it's hot, it's very hot, and I don't have AC, as you know, in this room, and I'm sweating. I've always decided, like, we end the show basically when I start sweating. That's when I'm always like, all right, it's time, it's over. My room has gotten too hot. Sorry. This is true. I'm serious.
It's like 64 degrees in my apartment right now.
I'm very jealous. I dropped my. Oh wait, no. Here's
I was
my
actually
fan.
gonna put a jacket on. I'm starting to shiver.
Like I've got this thing, guys, and we were always adapting, right? And so it's like instead of maybe fixing the climate crisis, we're like, let's just come up with products that people can use when it's 100 degrees outside, right? Like instead of saying, hey, we're going to figure out gun violence in schools, they're like, how about we just get drones that will chase down shooters in schools? Like there's always a product. It really is truly a follow the money kind of situation.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, guys. This was fun. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Will, yes, hydrate, register to vote, check your voter registration, believe, write down your vision for what you want for us, for America. Like maybe healthcare would be amazing. Healthcare that doesn't bankrupt us. So put it on your vision board and pick an organization that you want to get involved with and get to work. We're almost there. Then we have to keep going, but we're almost there. It just doesn't stop. That's the thing about democracy. You just got to keep going. I get it. I see why now people like the authoritarianism thing because they're like, I'll just give up. Democracy, it takes work.
Go do some shit.
Bye.